Welcome back, everybody! This is going to be a video on the fundamental theorem of algebra and finding all the solutions. So what I'm going to tell you is in this video we're going to cover some really in-depth type of problems. And your graphing calculator is essential to this, unless you want to do it the old school way, which means guessing and checking. And I'd rather not guess and check, so let's do this. The first thing that you're going to want to do is type this equation into y1 of your graphing calculator, because if there were 4 terms, there would be a chance we can group it. But in this problem, there's no way we can group it because there's 5 terms, so we need to type it in our graphing calculator. So we have x to the 4th, and then we have plus 2x cubed minus 13x squared minus 14x plus 24. Now I'm going to tell you, this is not going to fit on your standard window. So we're going to go change the window. We can leave the x min and max, but we're going to go change the y min and the y max to negative 50 and then positive 50. And we're going to click graph. And we are going to see that this graph crosses the x-axis 4 times. Now, the reason I'm showing you that is because that means we're actually going to be able to take a really awesome shortcut for this problem. And in factored form, this one is going to have 4 real solutions because it crosses the x-axis 4 times. It looks like negative 4, negative 2, 1, and 3, but you never want to trust the graph on the calculator. Make sure you check it with the table. Negative 2, 1, 3, the only other one we have to check is to make sure. So it is. It's negative 4, negative 2, 1, and 3. So let's think about where that comes from. The negative 4 comes from x plus 4. The negative 2 comes from x plus 2. Positive 1 comes from x minus 1, and positive 3 comes from x minus 3. So we actually just factor that entire thing with our graphing calculator. So you should have a new appreciation for your calculator. But what if the graphing calculator didn't do all of that for us? You still need to know how to factor this by hand. And this is where we use synthetic division, but we use our graphing calculator to get us one of the zeros. So we know how to do synthetic division by now. We have a 1, 2, negative 13, negative 14, and 24. And one of our zeros, I'm just going to start with the one that was furthest to the left, is a negative 4. Using synthetic division, we would have a 1, that gives us a negative 4, negative 2. 8 gives us a negative 5. Which is going to give us 20, leaving us with a positive 6 and a negative 24, which means we have no remainder. So that means we have x cubed minus 2x squared minus 5x plus 6. But if you were to try to group that, again, it's not going to work. So what that means is you need to use synthetic division again. But this time you have to use one of the other zeros from the graph. So we just used negative 4, now let's use negative 2. Bring down the 1. Negative 2, that's going to end up giving us a negative 4. And that's going to give us a positive 8, which gives us 3. And that gives us a negative 6, which gives us no remainder again. X squared minus 4x plus 3. That can be factored. And that can be factored to an x minus 3 and an x minus 1. But you can't forget about the zeros we used. We used the negative 2, which is x plus 2, and we used the negative 4, which came from x plus 4. And again, we have the exact same answer that we have over there. So then all you would have to do is list your solutions. So x is equal to the 3, the 1, the negative 2, and the negative 4 that we found. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, why did I need to do all of that? Well, your calculator doesn't always give you the answer. Here's an example of one of those. your graphing calculator will not give you this answer. So let's go see if we can figure out why. So we're going to go back to y1 and we're going to type in x cubed plus 5x squared plus 11x and plus 7. And now we're going to graph it. And you're going to see that it only crosses through the x-axis once. Well, if this has 3 possible solutions and one of them is a real solution, that means 2 of them are imaginary. And your graphing calculator is not going to go find an imaginary solution for you. So that means we have to use synthetic division because this cannot be grouped. You could try grouping. Anytime you have 4 terms, you can try grouping, but it's not going to work. So what we're going to have to do is use our one and only 0. Again, it's a -1. You would want to make sure you check every time, but I can tell you that it's a -1. And we bring down our 1. That gives us a -1. That gives us 4. -4 over here gives us 7. And -7 gives us no remainder. And x squared plus 4x plus 7 cannot be factored. That's prime. So we are done already. So our factored form is x squared plus 4x plus 7 and x plus 1. So now we have to go find our solutions. Well, we know one of our solutions is x equals a -1, but we have to go work with this guy now. And remember, every time something is prime doesn't mean there's no solution. It means you have to use one of your other ways of solving. And I prefer completing the square when it's easy to work with. So half of 4 is 2, squared is 4. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. X plus 2 quantity squared is equal to a -3. Square root both sides, and x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus I root 3. And then we would subtract our 2. So our other 2 solutions are a -2 plus or minus I root 3. Okay, so that's why we need to know how to use our graphing calculator. Now, if you notice right away that you have 4 beautiful answers and you want to use your graphing calculator to cheat and give you those answers, that's great. That's how you use the technology you have. So there's one more example. I would like you to pause the video and give it a try. I will tell you it is quite challenging. But I think if you know the steps, you can handle it. Just remember to put your 0 placeholders because you are never allowed to skip. Press pause and give it a try. So if you graphed it, you probably notice one of these falls below, but that's okay. We know that we have a -3, a -2, and a +3. Now I checked those. But you can't factor this right off the bat. I mean, actually, you can. So anybody that tried to group it, it would have worked out. You would have had x cubed plus 8, and then you would have had x squared minus 9. And you could have gone and done the sum of cubes, so x plus 2, and then x squared minus 2x plus 4, and then of course your x plus 3 and x minus 3. So you could have used grouping, and if you did, bravo. But I wanted to spend a little time doing the synthetic division, because to do it, it might have taken you 3 times. So I started with a -2, and then I have 1, 0, -9, 8, 0, -72, because you must remember you have to put placeholders. Okay, so then that would have given you a -2. That would have given you a 4 with a -5. And then this would have given you 10, which gives you 18. That gives you a -36 for a -36. And then you have your 72 with no remainder. And then I went and used a -3. And bring down the 1. And you start all over again. And if you want, you can try to factor that, but it's not going to work now that you're down to 4 terms. So we're going to do this again. This time I'm going to use the positive 3. Bring down your 1, that gives you 3. Negative 2, that's going to give you a negative 6, that gives you 4. That's going to give you 12, and that gives you 0. And again, we're at prime. That can't be factored. So the exact same way, the negative 2 came from x plus 2. The negative 3 came from x plus 3. The positive 3 came from an x minus 3. And this is our prime. So we can't factor it anymore. And there you go. X, and x squared is x to the 5th. So it checks out. We have 3 real solutions, negative 2, negative 3, and a positive 3. And one last time, you would have to use either the quadratic formula or completing the square, which would give you something like this. And it just so happens to work out that that side's going to be an x minus 1 squared is equal to a negative 3. It's just random that that occurred. Our final answer would be 1 plus or minus I root 3 again. So it doesn't always work out to be a negative 3. That just happened. All right, so that's it on this video on you guys can now factor things x to the 5th, x to the 6th, anything you need. This is Longo and I'm out. See you, bye.